Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Ladd, your MC for tonight, and thank you for joining us for the launch of The Joy of Talking Politics with Strangers, How to Save Democracy, One Conversation at a Time, by the incredible Elizabeth Chur. Woo! It's amazing to be gathered here with you all and at Manny's tonight, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in from around the world on Zoom. We really appreciate you. And Manny's, thank you so much for having us. I'm the editor of this vital book, and I know that Elizabeth is so excited to have you all here to support her efforts. And we're honored to have Elizabeth in conversation tonight with Judith Bolker, a powerhouse in grassroots political organizing. Let's give it up for Judith. Woo! Let me share a bit about our esteemed speakers. Elizabeth Chur is a swing left San Francisco volunteer and a freelance medical writer. She has trained over 2,500 volunteers nationally through acclaimed workshops, including phone bank and canvassing training for introverts, Spanish for activists, and You and the 34%, How to Have Meaningful Conversations with High Potential Voters. Elizabeth is a former journalist and documentary radio producer dedicated to helping all of us engage in conversations with voters that can protect and nurture our democracy. Her new book, The Joy of Talking Politics with Strangers, is fresh off the press this month. Yay! It's an inspiring guide for volunteers wanting to connect deeply with voters. The paperback and ebook are available on Amazon and other platforms. And tonight you can get a signed copy for $20 or 2 for $30. Wow. Or 3 for $40. What a great gift idea. It's a timely book, as you know, and the holidays will be here in just a heartbeat, right? Let's hear what folks have to say about this new exciting book. Jessica Craven, author of Chop Wood, Carry Water, the Daily Action Email, says about the book, had I taken everything useful I've learned about canvassing over many years and put it into words, I still wouldn't come close to the wisdom, large-heartedness, and humanity contained in this slim volume. Chur has written something that will show you not only how to change voters' minds, but quite possibly how to change yourself and gain greatly in the process. A must read. Yeah, it's good, right? Others have wonderful things to say. Joining Elizabeth in conversation is Judith Bolker. She's the co-founder and steering committee member of the Bay Area Coalition. Yeah, we have some folks in the house who know what that is. Thank you for being here. She's also a member of the Swing Left Peninsula Leadership Council, co-lead for Democrats Abroad, Californians Abroad, and regional organizer for the Center for Common Ground. Yes, love it. In 2023, just last year, Judith was named Volunteer of the Year by the California Democratic Party. Yes, Volunteer of the Year. Here with us tonight, very special. And now let's hear from Elizabeth and Judith. Thanks, everybody. Woohoo!
So, Elizabeth, I was sitting over that table and somebody walked in and did a testimonial of the power of your book.
Wow.
And you will know who I'm talking about. She said, I bought that book already and I read it before I went canvassing and it made my canvassing better.
Wow.
So, I know. That was so great. So you mentioned that Charlie Barron and
Myra Levy.
Myra, thank you. I was having a brain freeze. Myra Levy encouraged you to write a book and about your experiences canvassing and phone banking. Can you talk with us about how the book went from a concept of a plan to this amazing account that you created. This one right here.
Well, first of all, just thank you everybody for being here. This is kind of like a dream come true, and it means so much to be in community with all of you, especially after spending like the last year plus holed up. You know, it's ironic that I'm talking about the joy of talking politics with strangers, but I had to sort of experience the sorrow of sitting in my apartment by myself for months. But it's all worth it. And just hearing that comment makes it worth it. So, you know, as Mary mentioned, I've taught 2,500 plus volunteers through these online workshops, and that's been an incredible experience for me. And when I was canvassing, actually, I spent a month in the Bakersfield area for the 2022 midterms, and I thought it was pretty good at canvassing and phone banking before I went down there, but it's like going to a language immersion program, which I've also done to learn Spanish. And you know, just the practice of doing it every day, I got so much better because things would not work out. And I'm like, let me iterate, let me try something else. Let me take the kernel of something that's good and make it better. And I remember, I think it was GOTV weekend. And I just woke up early on a Sunday and I just had about 8 or 10 ideas of like, oh, I could give a little workshop or class about all the things I've learned. And I wrote them down, and that actually became the heart of the book, just because they'd been kind of cooking back there. So, and I was maybe going to like write an essay about what I learned. And I think I spent about one afternoon working on it. I'm like, oh no, I think I need to write a book now because there's so much that I learned. And I wanted to tell the longer version of things and to go in depth. And I feel like it's always been a dream of mine to write a book, but I never really found the right topic. Oh, thank you for coming. I didn't quite find the right topic or the urgency. And but you know, I feel like with what's at stake at this election and all those to come and all the things that I learned, it really deserved more than an essay. So that's kind of how I came to write a book.
That's how it came to be. How long did it take you to write it?
Well, there's all the field work, right? So
Yeah.
I think writing a book is actually you know, a process. And but the actual, so I spent and it was broken up because I do have a day job, you know, but I was able to spend a couple weeks down at my friend's house down in Santa Cruz. They live next to an organic farm. So I spent a few weeks compiling all my notes, because every night when I'd come home from canvassing, I'd furiously write in my journal, or I'd dictate notes onto my phone about the amazing people I met that day. And so then I collated all those notes and I categorized them by theme. I printed out pictures of all the people that had allowed me to take photos of them. And then I arranged them by theme and I put them on the ground and had made these collages and I hung them on the wall. And I created a spreadsheet of the different themes and which stories would go with each of those. And then so that was sort of the organizing part of it. And then the actual writing, I would say I spent about maybe 3 months total writing, but you know, it was really broken up. And then the editing process and then the layout process, that was really not that fun. But so it was about maybe 13 months from start to finish.
And you have a book? That's
Yes,
so
I
exciting.
do.
That's great. So you were talking about the incredible experiences you had out in the field. And I know your book is chock full of some of these wonderful tales. Could you share with us a couple of your favorites?
Sure. I'd like to read actually from the intro, because it is one of my favorite stories. And this just happened in March for Super Tuesday. I went down to the Porterville area for a week, and I asked to be sent out because I did start learning Spanish after Trump was elected, because I didn't know what else to do. So I thought, well, I'll start by learning Spanish, and maybe by 2020, I'll be able to talk with voters who feel more comfortable speaking in Spanish. So this is one of the voters I met. So I approach a light blue house and ring the doorbell. I'm here to talk with a voter I'll call Adelina. She's in her 20s, according to my voter contact app. Her older brother, Ricardo, answers the door. He says, oh, she's a night owl, so she won't be up until 5 this evening. Actually, though, I've been thinking about voting for the first time. I say, "Oh, that's fantastic. Tell me more about that." One of my favorite phrases. He gestures to a couple of folding chairs on the porch, and we take a seat. I ask him, "I'm curious to know what's important to you. If you were president of the United States, what 2 or 3 things would you change?" He says, "I think the US needs to have less testosterone in its foreign relations and should get people together and broker peace." Wow, that's not a response I was expecting from someone who's never voted, but it sounds promising. I ask him what he does for work, and he says he's worked construction, agriculture, anything he can do with his hands. Ricardo points to his toned biceps curving out from beneath his black sleeveless shirt. "I stay fit carrying 80-pound bags up and down ladders and never have to go to the gym," he says. "You don't see many people around here using workout equipment because they get all their exercise at work." The conversation goes in many directions as he jumps from one thought to the next. He tells me he got all D's and F's in high school. Numbers and words were hard for me, but I could learn how to fix things or use a piece of machinery in a couple hours. Ricardo says, "I say there are lots of different kinds of intelligence. It sounds like you're off the charts when it comes to fixing and making things." He mentions that he drank a lot in his younger days, but he's getting his life together. He says he knows he doesn't have a filter and says whatever pops into his head, but he's working on changing that because it hurts people's feelings or makes them angry. I ask if he identifies as a Democrat or Republican. He says he doesn't know the difference between the two parties and asks me to explain. I tell him that based on what he shared with me about wanting more peaceful relationships between countries and how he earns a living using his hands, he sounds more in tune with the Democrats, who stand with working people rather than the bosses. I tell him I'm there in support of the Democratic candidate for Congress, and I give him a flyer. I ask what, if anything, he knows about Congress. Nothing, he tells me. So I briefly explain the roles of the 3 branches of government. The president leads the federal government, Congress makes laws, and the courts interpret the laws. "Oh, it's a system of 3s. That way it's balanced," he says with excitement. "Exactly," I tell him. "That's the whole idea. So no one part has too much power." I tell him that today is election day and that he can vote at the Veterans Memorial. I pull up a picture of it on my phone, which I took the day before when I got into town, and ask if he recognizes it. "Oh, yeah," he says confidently. "In high school, me and my buddies used to drink 24 packs in the back of that building." I say, "Awesome. You can go back to your old stomping grounds to vote anytime before 8 o'clock tonight." I hesitate. California allows voters to register to vote on election day. However, given what he told me about having trouble with words and numbers, I worry he might have a hard time filling out the bureaucratic registration form. Since he's never voted before, he might feel intimidated or just leave, even if he even makes it to the polls. I say, "Hey, since we're talking right now, why don't I just register you to vote online?" Ricardo says, "Sure." So I pull up the website on my phone and walk him through the form. We enter all his information and submit it. There's just one catch. Since it's election day, it's too late for the registration to be in the official records of the polling site. The website says to fill out another registration form at the polls. I ask him, "Will you be home for another 20 minutes? He says yes. So I ask him to wait for me. I go to my car where I have a portable printer in my trunk. I download and wirelessly print the voter registration affidavit from my phone. I fold the form, put it in an envelope, and bring it back to him. Just show this to the poll workers when you go vote, and they should let you fill out your ballot, I tell him. But just in case you have questions or run into any problems, can I give you my phone number? You can call or text me. We exchange numbers, and I test out calling him to make sure I entered his number correctly. I ask when he can go vote. Ricardo says he can go that afternoon after he renews his driver's license at the DMV. In my head, I think, it's a long shot. Maybe 10% chance he'll vote, given that he's never done it before and he seems easily distracted. But I say, that sounds like a great plan. And if you do go vote, I'd love to see a selfie with your "I voted" sticker. We say goodbye. I head to the public library to use the bathroom, then eat my bag lunch in the back seat of my car. It's turning into a hot afternoon and I'm tired, a little grumpy, and wondering if I spent too much time talking with Ricardo when there are so many other doors to knock. Well, at least I got him registered, which might not have happened otherwise. As I'm finishing my lunch, I look at my phone and I see I have a message. It's from Ricardo, and it's just one word: finished. He also sends me a selfie with, yes, his I voted sticker. Yes. I'm so excited. I almost dropped the rest of my sandwich. I text him back and say, "Oh my goodness, you totally made my day. Congratulations. How did it go?" He writes back that everything went smoothly. The poll workers looked at the voter registration affidavit I printed for him and handed it back before giving him his ballot. That night, a little before 7, I circle back to Ricardo's house. I'm hoping to catch his sister Adelina, the voter I originally was there to talk with. She's awake this time and is a very sweet young woman who tells me she's really liberal, but she seems anxious about voting and nervously wrings her hands. I'm not comfortable voting because I haven't done any research, she tells me. I tell her how easy it is and gently inquire about her priorities. Still, I can tell she is feeling more and more uncomfortable. Just then, Ricardo comes back from work. I say, "Hey, Ricardo, good to see you again. Congratulations on being a voter. I'm just talking with your sister about voting. Maybe you can tell her about your experience today?" He says it went fine. And during his short wait in line to vote, he even Googled a YouTube video to learn more about the difference between Democrats and Republicans.
I love it.
He says he learned a lot. I feel embarrassed about underestimating his initiative earlier in the day. I joke about what a productive day he's had, going to work, renewing his driver's license, and voting for the first time. Even hearing about Ricardo's positive experience, Adelina still doesn't want to go to the polls. As a protective big brother, he asks with concern, "Oh, do you feel nervous? Do you want me to go there with you?" She says no and awkwardly tells me, "I'm sorry. I just don't want to vote this time." I'm disappointed, but I understand. The polls close in 45 minutes. She has the right to make her own decisions, and I can see that pressuring her further will only increase her discomfort. Even though I would have been thrilled if both of them voted. 1 out of 2 is an accomplishment. Now that there are 2 registered voters in the House, maybe Ricardo's example will rub off on Adelina. I thank them both for their time, wish them a good night, and head out into the darkness to knock a few more doors before the polls close.
Okay. So do I really need to start carrying a printer in my trunk?
By any means necessary, Judith. We're going to win this election.
I love how you go all out. That's wonderful. So you mentioned Ricardo didn't understand the difference between Democrat and Republican. And your parents, your father was a Republican and your mother was a Democrat. And I am so fascinated by people who grow up one way and choose another way. And I'm so curious, what led you to choose a Democrat as the party that you became associated with? And then after that, can you discuss how you went from being a voter, just a voter, somebody who would go every time there's an election and vote, to being an activist, to doing, putting a printer in your truck so that you can help people to vote? What was the journey you took?
Yeah, so I'll talk about just how I became a Democrat. I think it was a lot of things. I think growing up, I probably spent more time with my mom because my mom was a homemaker for the first 10 years of my life. So I saw her example. She volunteered a lot with her church, the Newman Center in Berkeley, which was kind of like the radical leftist sort of sort of liberation theology church that served the University of California, Berkeley. And she was active in serving meals to homeless people. And I think service was always a big part of her story. And I just witnessed that. I think my dad was kind of an old school Republican. I think he would never tell me how he voted. He said that's private. So even though we lived in the same house, we didn't talk about politics. I think if he were alive today, I don't think he would have supported Trump because he had zero tolerance for phonies. And even though he was economically conservative, I think he would have been appalled at what the party has become. But I think also my evolution as a Democrat, I mean, I was always, I think, more concerned about social issues, poverty, homelessness. And I think also I worked at St. Anthony Foundation here in the Tenderloin for 10 years and just seeing how economic policies were like written on the bodies of people who were at the bottom of the totem pole really helped shape my consciousness. And then also, I spent a year after graduating from college, I had thought I might be a journalist, but for various reasons, it turned out not to be a great fit for me. But I did spend a year researching development of free press in Eastern Europe in the early 90s, shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And, I carried one backpack for a whole year. And I think just having that experience of being an outsider, not part of the cultures, not able to speak the languages fluently. I'd studied German for 5 years. I did interviews in German, but I was not fluent. And just seeing how challenging it is to be an outsider, and also seeing the dangers of the anti-foreigner right-wing violence there, and being, especially in the 90s when there was a lot less kind of international flow through the former Eastern Bloc, just seeing what that was like. All of that helped to shape my consciousness, I think, about how dangerous it can be when anybody who's different is targeted, and what can happen that how fragile our democracies are, because I spoke with people, 150 journalists that year who had worked under communism or had witnessed that as a foreign correspondent. And just in terms of how I became an activist, I mean, like I was very dutiful. I did vote in every election, and I did phone bank maybe every 4 years, like 1 or 2 shifts. And I was like, check, we're done. Right. And I figured that other people who were far more qualified than I was would take care of it, like these idealistic college students, or I don't know, people that just were smarter and more skilled and knew all the policy positions. And I think, like, for probably most of the people in this room, I think 2016 was a huge slap in the face, and that sickening feeling that I had the next day after the election. And before Trump was even inaugurated, I just had this dread in the pit of my stomach, and he hadn't even been inaugurated. And then I swear, every day of that presidential term, I mean, all I could do was think of, how soon can we get to the next election? How soon can we get the midterms? How soon can we get to 2020? And I vowed that I personally would not necessarily be able to swing the whole country, but I was going to do my darndest to do everything in my power to, fight for a Democratic victory in 2018 and 2020.
And you were an introvert, right?
I am an introvert. Big time.
Yeah.
I am I would say a friendly introvert.
There we go. And you have some things in your book about how to move beyond and get engaged. Yes.
Well, and I think also, I mean, just to fellow introverts in the room, any other introverts, you want to raise your hand here? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We're outnumbered.
I actually think that, and one of the things I talk about in the book is how to embrace our superpowers. And I actually think being an introvert can be a superpower, that we are really good at listening, at deep listening. I think, we excel at these one-to-one connections, which voter engagement on the phone or in person, that's usually how it is, one-on-one. And I think the ability to think deeply about issues. I'm not saying that extroverts can't do that, but I think,
Glad
I'm the
to
kind of
hear
person
that.
at a party that I'll like hang out with somebody for an hour, rather than
Uh-huh.
work in the room. And I feel like, my approach to canvassing often is to really go deep and to really find out the details. I don't want to just check the box. What issue you're most concerned about? Economy, education, immigration, check. Next, I really appreciate getting to get to know what's really most important to people. So I think that whatever your sort of skill set, your personality, you can pull from those abilities. You don't, and I think that's one of the most important things. If you learn nothing else from this evening, I hope you don't. I really, it's a compliment. People say, "Oh, we should clone you," and we don't. First of all, it's not possible. Second of all, that's not the idea. Right? That's not the idea. I think the idea is that we take our own strengths and we use them in the service of this work, whatever they are. And they're going to be like sort of a different palette of strengths for each of us, but we can bring that out into the field. I think there's always this thing of working with the ingredients we have, but then we can learn some new. I certainly have learned a lot, and taking your baseline strengths and being able to just kind of level up, by practice, to get better at this work.
It's great. And I liked how you previously talked about learning from your failures, about getting better. I always feel that way when I'm phone banking. I'm learning every second. So I took Michelle Obama's words to heart to do something. And I know a lot of you here are activists and are really busy in your canvassing and phone banking. And some of you are soon to become activists, and be sure to visit the table in the back. And we have lots of things you can do. But one of my favorite paragraphs in your book was on page 35. And it talked about the importance of self-care. And it's really an absolute necessity as we get busier and busier with, there's too much to be done. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind reading that paragraph to everybody, or talking about self-care, because I know you bring it up in your book.
Yeah. So I was talked about actually how these different experiences from my life before activism helped me. And one of them was actually working at St. Anthony's. You can imagine dealing with the issue of homelessness. This is not a quick fix. And I remember sometimes going to work on Muni and going through Civic Center and wondering, and then I just laughed at myself because it's sort of audacious, like Elizabeth Chur is going to end homelessness. Like, I don't think so, but I can be working, I can do my small bit. So I talked about what I learned at working at St. Anthony's, and also I felt the hazards of burnout. No matter how hard I worked, there would always be more to do. Self-care was an absolute necessity in such a challenging environment. And also I talk about, perhaps most of all, I learned the life-giving energy of being in community with other people who shared the same values. Their passion, exuberant humor, creativity, incredible generosity of heart showed me how to find joy in the struggle. Even when our progress can feel microscopic and imperfect, wrestling with some of the biggest questions of our time is ultimately worthwhile and rewarding. And I just want to say, I have a whole chapter at the end about self-care, because and I think this is so important. And this is where I'm gonna, I love the Harris Walz ticket. It's amazing. I think Walz was a brilliant pick for VP, but I beg to differ on this "I'll sleep when I'm dead" mentality, because
you just might kill yourself before.
Yeah, and I have to say, I don't know about, maybe some of you can not sleep and still be at the top of your game, but that's not me. I'm like an 8-hour plus girl a night, and I have to say, maybe if I were doing like doing my laundry, that would work. But when I am at the door of a voter, I'm hot, I'm tired, sweat is rolling down the back of my shirt, and they are telling me I don't vote, or they're telling me they don't know the difference between Democrats and Republicans. I need to bring my best self to those conversations. I need to bring like a deep well of patience, groundedness, non-judgmental curiosity. And there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into this work, I think, if I'm doing it right. And to not just try to jump in there, make them do things, because that really doesn't work very well. And to just be able to be present with them. And that might sound kind of fluffy to some people, that I think oftentimes the numbers are rewarded. How many calls did you make? How many doors did you knock? And what I would like to say, there's a merit and an importance in tracking numbers, but I think there's also a merit in qualitative outcomes. What was the best conversation you had today, and why? And I think it's really important to be able to show up like as well resourced as possible. And it's not like I'm going to be the most relaxed I've ever been, like the day before the election. That's not realistic. But I do talk in this this self-care chapter particularly about, I took one day off a week when I was in Bakersfield for a week, and I would go grocery shopping. I would cook a huge pot of food for the week that was nourishing. I would meditate every morning. Like this morning, actually, I've meditated for 721 days now in a row. Some days it was 10 seconds, but I did meditate. I found a public pool in Bakersfield, and I went swimming 2 or 3 times a week, which meant I got out in the field later. I stayed later, but I did start later. And I think sometimes there's this, this desperate drive to like feel like it's kind of this grasping thing. And also sometimes, frankly, a competitiveness of like almost kind of this macho attitude of, how many doors did you knock, and I feel like it's really important, again, to not compare myself with others, that I am making my contribution. And sometimes I think, I'm haunted by this prospect of maybe if I pushed a little harder, if I knocked a few more doors, if I got up earlier, I could have swung this election if we lose by 1 vote. And, really, it's not all up to me. Yeah, right? I mean, no pressure there. I think what we really need to do is, and also I think at the convention, the message was really about we have to work harder than we've ever worked in our life. And I would say, yes, and I'm working pretty darn hard right now. I think what we really need to do is we need to encourage more people to go out there and join us. And I feel like rather than saying we got to work harder, yes, like than we've ever worked, for the people that have never done this, I would say, why don't you just try it once?
Yes.
Come once and see how you like it. Try phone banking once, because I feel like just getting your foot in the door, I feel like hopefully you'll have one of those conversations that, just will illuminate your day and make you want to do it more, like I did. You'll get the bug. And I think it is so important to be welcoming in that way. And so, because we don't want the message to go out there that only like the hardcore, like fringe fanatics, like, many of the people that I'm privileged to work with. I mean, we need those folks, but we need kind of a massive outpouring of people. And I think we need it to be a welcoming place where people have never done it feel comfortable, and they're not feeling like they have to sign away their whole life. Just try it once. So I think that is really going to draw in more people and make it feel like anyone can do this kind of work.
And I love how you even wrote about it, how you're working with people who share your values. And
Yes.
I mean, you feel at home. So speaking of home, do we have any questions? Anybody in the audience have a question for?
Mary will have our Oprah style mic here.
Oh, there we go.
And also, if you're on Zoom, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited. If you want to put any questions in the chat, Mary will be able to read off one of those later too.
All right, right in the front, we have, okay, over there.
And maybe tell
then
us your
in the
name
front.
also when you ask the question.
So I'm Holly. We've talked, we've only met on Zoom and through email. And I'm the person that bought it right away when I thought, oh God, I need this. And my husband and I went canvassing in Reno last weekend.
Oh, hold it
Oh,
close.
it's like
my
an ice
husband-
cream cone.
My
Yeah.
husband and I went canvassing in Reno last weekend. And I haven't finished it, I'll admit, but I read a lot of the book, and we did put some of these ideas to work. And just the whole idea of leading with questions instead of the headquarters, they're working very hard there in Reno, but they just wanted us to lay down the Democratic spiel right off the bat. And can we count on your support for Kamala Harris and, Senator Rosen right off the bat? It was just not right. So we started asking them questions, or my husband would say, I really, as a gardener, I really like this kind of rose you have, and try to get some kind of, relationship going. And it really it really made a difference, and we'll get better at it. But I thank you for that.
That's
Wow.
great.
Thank you. That makes me feel like this was all worth it, just
Yeah.
hearing that story.
Bravo.
Yeah,
That's
thank
great.
you. Woo!
All right, over here, Mary. Yes.
Now, this isn't so much a question as an observation. I'm Julie Motz. I'm from KWMR.
Oh, yeah.
I hope to get around to finishing the book and doing an interview with you. But I was at a very different kind of meeting this morning. The DCCC had like 700,
the women's, yeah,
well-heeled,
conference.
extremely well-dressed women getting together at the Fairmont Hotel to support the Democratic Party. And it was very interesting to me because I had certain questions about why the Democrats weren't doing certain things. Like, to me, it seemed obvious that they should be promoting the environment because it would pull in young voters, and the Republicans have no defense for it. So I was able at the end to buttonhole a guy named David Simas, who is one of the one of the policymakers who worked for Obama, and he explained to me very carefully that most of the young voters are not college, and 70% of them aren't, and they are not interested in the environment, and it was such a relief to me after feeling, oh, they're just doing it wrong, to have it explained to me what the strategy was behind things. So what I would advise people to do is try to discover what some of the Democratic strategists are doing and why they're doing it. So if you have a burning issue that you think isn't being addressed, they've usually figured out something about it. I felt relieved actually to have that. The whole thing was very enlightening. The other thing about it was there were all these young women candidates, from all across the country. Each gave a sort of 30-second spiel, and it was completely inspiring and joyful and energized. So, I would advise people to check in with some of those, read about some of the candidates who are running, even if places you're going to be calling to or postcarding to. You'll be totally, totally inspired.
Thank you.
That's great. Any other questions? Way in the back.
Colleen in the back.
Colleen. Hey, Colleen. Good to see you.
I always say if Judith Bolker is here, I'm in the right place. So,
Indeed.
and Elizabeth, you. So I did go canvassing this weekend with someone, and she was brand new, and she felt that she was really equipped to do it because she heard you speak.
Wow.
So I listened, from her point of view. So that was really wonderful to hear somebody speaking your name. So to the point, who do you listen to? What meetings do you go to? Whose message do you trust? Where to put your activism energy?
Well, I would say the people I listen to most are the voters. I think that's the most important thing because they will tell me. I think it's less important what I think. And one of the chapters I have in this book is 80% them, 20% me. So it's going to be different for everybody. And rather than kind of coming in with my sort of canned ideas of what's important to them, I try to just ask them because I can't assume from them, and I've been canvassing mostly in the Latino community, and it is not a monolith, let me tell you. And I think it's just a sign of respect to try to let them guide me about their priorities. And I do that by asking open-ended questions, and not just that, but probing for details. Like, as a writer, we're taught don't show, not tell. So I don't want to just check off the box. Like, this is the thing that care more. Tell me more about what that looks like in your life. What would it look like if minimum wage were $20 an hour? How would your life be different? And really get them to imagine. I want to sketch out the details, like the really mundane details, because I feel like they say the devil's in the details, but I kind of think the divine is in the details as well. And people are more invested and they can see it more clearly if they are painting a picture for you. And then that way I can also speak in a compelling way, because people, I think, generally aren't moved by policy points. They're moved by like, how is this going to affect my life in the day to day? And if I can understand the details of what that looks like, I can, I think, engage in a deeper way with them.
I really like the divineness in the details. That's great. That's great. Do we have any questions from Zoom?
We sure do. We have Damon and Jose say, Elizabeth, your insights are inspired and inspiring. Can you talk more about the importance of joy in your canvassing experiences P.S. Love from Ohio.
Woohoo! Oh, David and Jose, I'm so glad you could be here. Love you too. It's so funny. I came up with the title of this book in conversation. I gave a Zoom talk back in sometime about a year ago with Together We Will Albany Berkeley with Pam Toulouse, and we were just talking about what to call the talk to try to draw people in. And I think something that's really important, I feel like there's a lot of fear mongering, like this is the most important election of our lifetime and democracy is on the line and it's going to be the apocalypse, and all that is true, but
but don't be scared.
But I feel like rather than like scaring people into like or shaming them into doing this sort of hard thing of talking politics with strangers, I think we need to dangle the carrot of like, this is amazing. These are some of the most transformative experiences. I mean, I swear to God, like being in Bakersfield for a month was one of the best things I'd ever done in my life. And I would never in a million years have thought that before, but it was so incredible, the experiences I had. And I think we need to maybe do a better job of like, this is amazing. You want some of this, like you want in on this. And I think I'm so excited. I mean, this title came along way before Kamala Harris became our presidential nominee. So I kind of feel like in a way, like, we were onto something then, but I think drawing people, and I think it's, in the short term, scaring people or like guilt tripping them or shaming or whatever might have like some short term impact. But I think in the long term, and this goes back to the avoidance of burnout, that we need to be sustained by joy, because there is a deeper energy that comes with just feeling, yes, I'm going to be tired, and yes, it's going to take everything I have. But to know that I'm kind of buoyed along by this force that's much greater than I am, in community with everybody else. And there's something magical about connecting with voters and also seeing the world in a different way. I think it is so important because I think with joy, we're unstoppable, and I think we need to like find our way into that because that will help sustain us, not just for this election, but all of those to come. And so I really encourage you to try to connect with your joy too in this work.
Yes, that was beautiful. Any more? Do we have time for some more questions? Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
Bring you the mic.
The food is coming.
I am curious about talking politics with family, and especially, ones that are on the opposite side of the fence. Like, I am so petrified to even bring anything up. And do you talk anything about that in your book?
Not directly. Actually, I think that would be a harder book to write. The Joy of Talking Politics with Family.
Yes.
But I mean, frankly, I think it's harder to talk with family than it is with strangers, because strangers, if it's not going well, I can just say, thank you very much, see you later. But I can't do that with family. I guess what I would suggest is the same thing I would do with voters, but it might be more challenging, but to try to come with non-judgmental curiosity. And, I wish I had this quote verbatim, but there's this quote from Rumi that talks about, beyond right and wrong, there is a field, I will meet you there. And to try to find, if there are points of commonality, to maybe inquire like with curiosity and not with animosity or with that gotcha spirit about just why they might have these beliefs, what has informed their experience, to bring curiosity, and also just to know that it's not my job to change their opinion. I haven't failed if I haven't gotten them to see it my way. And, really maybe the most important thing I can do is to be an example of what we profess to say of, that we're open-minded and tolerant. And I think in some ways to be able to be open to what they have to tell me, there might be more nuance in there than initially meets the eye. And also that relationship is the most important thing, that I may disagree with them on some or maybe many things, but I still love them. I still want to be in relationship with them. And I think over time that conversation, it's possible that it can shift, but I think I also need to be open to the possibility that I might learn something and that I might actually not be right about everything. Shocking, right? But I think I need to start with that, not expect them to lead with that.
Yeah, that's great. Oh boy, we've got a number of other questions. Can we get,
I think maybe one more
one
question
more?
and then we want to maybe wrap it up.
okay, yeah.
This is bouncing off that a little bit, but have you experienced people changing their minds? And I'm curious what that looked like.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I have one of my favorite stories in this book is about when I asked what 2 or 3 things this voter would change. She was a registered Republican, so I was already like, oh boy, I'm just kind of ready. She was very nice, very cordial, but she said that the issue of non-binary gender being taught in the schools she was like enraged about that. Whew. And I thought, okay, here we are. This is one of those wedge issues. And but I said, tell me more about that. And we talked for a lot, and it turns out that she said that she didn't think it was age appropriate, but she didn't actually have a problem with it being taught, but she thought it was a high school kind of topic, not for her 10-year-old. So, okay, there's already some nuance there. And then she said that she didn't like that it was her way or the highway. I mean, the school district said if your kid is in our district, they're learning about that. That's a curriculum and that's it. And she didn't like it. And I said, it sounds, and so one of my things that I talk about is to presume goodwill and also to try to reflect back the very best interpretation of what I heard. Might be a little extra generous, but people like to think of themselves as open-minded, tolerant, thoughtful. So I said, it sounds like you think that talking about non-binary gender should be a partnership between the school district and the parents, not just the school district like mandating this. She said, yeah, and they should give parents options, like they should be able to opt out, or if they're not comfortable, or I think I should explain this to my kid so he doesn't get confused. And I said, okay. And then she said, and I also think that they should educate the parents, not just the kids. I'm like, tell me more about that. And she said, well, like they had a webinar about bullying in the schools. They could have a webinar about non-binary gender for parents who were interested. I was like, that's brilliant. And this is where I had to confront my own bias that I had written her off at the beginning of the conversation as this intolerant Republican, but she actually had really thoughtful ideas that I never would have come up with. So by the end of that conversation, she really felt heard. Oh, and also I mentioned, she said, well, it's not age appropriate. And I just mentioned casually that I've been talking to some other voters because there had been this kid in the community that had been bullied, I think partly because he was non-binary or they were non-binary, and that sometimes kids actually take their own lives. You cannot wait actually till later. And I just kind of casually mentioned that. I wasn't trying to confront her with that, but she's like, oh, I did not hear about that. So I think sometimes just being engaged, not assuming that I'm right, drawing them out. And then by the end of the conversation, she said, yeah, I think I'll probably vote for Rudy Salas for Congress. And it turns out that, she also had an adult son that was registered, and her husband had just received his citizenship a few months ago. So I said, hey, could you just share this information with them as well? And she said, yeah, I will. And so by the end, that conversation was 40 minutes, but that was potentially 3 votes in our column. So I think that's what it takes sometimes to presume goodwill, to reflect back the best interpretation of what they have to say, to be curious about not just what they think, but why, and to ask for their ideas about how they might do something better. And, a lot of times I think we may not know what the results are of our work, but in that case, I actually did get to hear, I feel like kind of a shift in thought, and that made it all worth it.
Oh, what an inspiring story. What a great way to end this wonderful evening. I do have to say, saying the words "tell me more" has changed my life. So I suggest you try it. We have, let's see, Michelle is back there. If you feel inspired to start canvassing, phone banking, we have some information there. And I think Mary is going to tell, yes, Mary's going to tell you about what else we have for you.
Oh, thank you so much, Elizabeth and Judith. Let's give them applause. What a wonderful conversation, an amazing book, a great book event. And thank you, Manny's, for having us. So word of mouth is very powerful for books like this. So we really encourage you, spread the word about the book, request it from your local libraries, plural, buy a copy, leave reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. And there's more information. We have these amazing handouts. You can take those. It could serve as a bookmark as well. And we will have book signing. There's a table in the back. You can also get your picture with the author, Elizabeth, and or at the stage. So what we'll do is we'll just transition to having the book signing. There's some delicious food from Manny's, and we'll have Elizabeth say some words, I think.
Yeah. And right before that, can we get a group photo? Our wonderful photographer, Elizabeth Fall, is in the house. And if you happen to have the book, if maybe you could hold it up, maybe she could come from up on the stage. And if not, just show your exuberance for talking politics with strangers. That would be awesome. Yeah. Yeah, maybe actually just you can stay seated for now. If you have the book, just hold it up. Maybe Elizabeth, you can come up. Yeah. Yeah. Oh wow. Woohoo. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I will sign your book if you either brought your copy or want to get a copy. And thank you for all you're doing to protect our democracy.